I worked 60-hour weeks while my boss stole my money and future. One question at dinner changed everything. The question hit me like ice water. Marcus Chen, our CEO, raised his wine glass and smiled across the table at me. So, Jordan, I hope that year-end bonus helped with your wedding plans. I froze mid-bite, my fork suspended in the air. Around the elegant private dining room, 12 faces turned toward me. My fiancée Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, sensing something was wrong. I set down my fork carefully, my heart beginning to pound. What bonus? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Marcus's smile faltered. He glanced at my direct supervisor, Richard Hale, who sat 3 seats down. Richard's face had gone pale, his wine glass trembling slightly in his hand. The silence stretched impossibly long. Marcus cleared his throat. The $20,000 performance bonus. I approved it myself 3 months ago. $20,000. 3 months ago. I had received nothing. My eyes locked onto Richard's face, watching him squirm. I never received any bonus, I said clearly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. Sarah's grip on my hand tightened. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Marcus excused himself to make a phone call, his expression dark. Richard tried to laugh it off, suggesting there must have been some administrative error with payroll. But I knew better. For 18 months, I had worked under Richard Hale. I had landed 3 major clients, each worth over $2 million in contracts. I had stayed late countless nights, worked weekends, and missed family events. Richard had taken credit for every single success. He presented my proposals as his own ideas in executive meetings. He forwarded my detailed reports with his name at the top. I had suspected, but never had proof. Until tonight. After dessert, Marcus pulled me aside in the corridor. His jaw was tight, his usual warmth replaced by cold anger. Jordan, I need you to come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. 8 sharp. I nodded. He hesitated, then added quietly, I'm sorry. This should never have happened. When Sarah and I got to the car, she finally spoke. $20,000, Jordan. Where did it go? I barely slept that night. Sarah and I stayed up until 2 in the morning, going through my pay stubs and bank statements. There was no bonus. No mysterious deposit. No explanation. Just months of regular paychecks while Richard had apparently pocketed money meant for me. When I arrived at the office at 7:45, Marcus's assistant was already waiting. He wants to see you immediately, she said, her expression sympathetic. Inside his office, Marcus sat with Linda Torres, our head of human resources, and an older man I didn't recognize. Jordan, this is David Park, our corporate attorney, Marcus said grimly. Sit down. David opened a folder and slid it across the desk. We pulled the records last night. The bonus was approved on September 15th and processed through payroll on September 20th. The direct deposit went to an account ending in 7432. I stared at the numbers. That's not my account. Linda leaned forward. We know. We've already frozen the account and contacted our bank. Jordan, we need to ask you directly, did Richard Hale ever discuss this bonus with you? I told them everything. How Richard had called me into his office in September, telling me my performance review was satisfactory but not exceptional. How he'd said the company was tightening budgets and there would be no bonuses this year. How he'd convinced me to feel grateful just to keep my job. Linda's pen scratched furiously across her notepad. Marcus's expression grew darker with every sentence. He told you there were no bonuses at all? David asked carefully. I nodded. He made it sound like company-wide belt tightening. He said even he wasn't getting one. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. Richard received a $15,000 bonus. Which, compared to what you should have gotten, now seems highly suspicious. David pulled out another document. Jordan, we've subpoenaed Richard's personal banking records. The account that received your bonus belongs to Richard's wife, Diane. We believe he redirected your payment through payroll fraud. My stomach turned. This wasn't just taking credit for my work. This was theft. Actual, prosecutable theft. What happens now? I asked. Marcus stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Now? Now we handle this properly. Richard arrived at 9:30, his usual time, carrying his expensive leather briefcase and Starbucks coffee. He didn't know anything was wrong until security intercepted him at the elevator. I watched from the break room as they escorted him directly to Marcus's office. Through the glass walls, I could see his confusion turn to panic. 10 minutes later, raised voices echoed down the hallway. Richard emerged, his face bright red, followed by Marcus and Linda. This is insane. Richard shouted, drawing stares from nearby cubicles. You're accusing me based on what? Some clerical error? Marcus's voice was ice cold. We have the bank records, Richard. Your wife's account. Your signature on the payroll authorization form where you changed Jordan's account number. We have everything. Richard's eyes darted around wildly, landing on me standing in the break room doorway. For a moment, pure hatred flashed across his face. You ungrateful little. Security stepped between us. Linda handed Richard a folder. You're terminated effective immediately. We're filing a police report for fraud and theft. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal belongings under supervision. The office erupted in whispers. People emerged from cubicles like prairie dogs, craning their necks to watch Richard's humiliation. My coworker Jen appeared beside me, eyes wide. Oh my God, what happened? Before I could answer, Richard turned back toward me, shaking off the security guard's hand. You think you're so clever, don't you? He spat. You think you did all that work alone? I made you. I gave you those opportunities. I felt surprisingly calm. Months of swallowed anger had crystallized into something clear and cold. You stole from me, I said simply. You stole my work, my credit, and my money. That's not opportunity. That's theft. His mouth worked soundlessly. Then he grabbed his briefcase and stormed toward his office, security trailing behind. Sarah called during my lunch break. Everyone's texting me, she said breathlessly. Is it true? Did he really steal your bonus? I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. $20,000. Plus who knows what else over the past year and a half. She was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I looked at the email Marcus had sent an hour ago, requesting another meeting at 2. I guess I'm about to find out. At 2 o'clock sharp, I returned to Marcus's office. This time, it was just the two of us. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, then poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. Jordan, I need to be honest with you, he began. This situation is far worse than we initially thought. My stomach dropped. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his computer, turning the monitor so I could see. We've been auditing Richard's department all morning. In the past 18 months, you've been directly responsible for $6.2 million in new business. That's 37% of our entire new client revenue. I stared at the numbers, barely comprehending. Richard reported all of it as his own work, Marcus continued. Every proposal, every presentation, every client meeting. According to our records, you were just his assistant on these projects. The word assistant stung. I had drafted every contract, researched every market analysis, built every pitch deck from scratch. We promoted Richard to senior director last May based on this performance, Marcus said quietly. We gave him a $40,000 raise and a corner office. All of it was built on your work. I felt numb. $40,000 raise. Corner office. Senior director title. All stolen from me. There's more, Marcus said, and his tone made me look up sharply. He pulled out a printed email chain. We found communications between Richard and two of our clients, Morrison Tech and Belmont Industries. He was negotiating side deals. My blood ran cold. What kind of side deals? He was offering them discounted rates in exchange for personal consulting fees paid directly to him. Essentially, he was undercutting our pricing and pocketing the difference. I couldn't breathe. Morrison Tech was my biggest account, a $2.3 million contract I had spent 4 months developing. How much did he take? I whispered. Marcus's jaw tightened. We're still calculating, but preliminary estimates suggest at least $80,000 over the past year. $80,000. Plus my $20,000 bonus. $100,000 he had stolen while I worked 60-hour weeks and worried about making rent. Jordan, Marcus said, leaning forward. I'm offering you Richard's position. Senior Director of Client Development. Effective immediately, with the raise and the office he should never have had. And we're backdating your bonus with interest. I walked out of Marcus's office in a daze. Senior Director. The title I'd dreamed about but never thought I'd reach before 35. And I was only 29. Jen practically tackled me at my desk. Tell me everything. Around us, a small crowd had gathered. Word traveled fast in our office. I gave them the basic outline, watching their expressions shift from shock to anger to something like awe. He stole your bonus, someone gasped. And tried to blame payroll? By the end of the day, everyone knew. The emails started flooding in. Congratulations from colleagues. Apologies from coworkers who admitted they'd suspected Richard was taking credit but hadn't known how to speak up. And one email that made me pause. It was from Melissa Park, who worked in Richard's previous department before he transferred to ours. Jordan, I need to talk to you about Richard. He did the same thing to me 3 years ago. Can we meet? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Linda in HR. Because if Richard had done this before, if there were other victims, they deserved justice too. Sarah met me after work, throwing her arms around me in the parking garage. Senior Director, she breathed. Jordan, I'm so proud of you. But as we drove home, I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. The next morning, I arrived to find my belongings had been moved to Richard's old corner office overnight. The space felt enormous compared to my old cubicle. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A massive desk dominated the room. But sitting on that desk was a note in Richard's handwriting. You'll regret this. I immediately forwarded a photo to security and Linda. Within an hour, they confirmed Richard had accessed the building at 6 in the morning, before his keycard was deactivated. We're adding it to the police report, Linda assured me. And we've filed for a restraining order. The police report. I had almost forgotten that part. This wasn't just an HR issue anymore. Richard was facing actual criminal charges. Detective Sarah Chen from the Financial Crimes Unit called me that afternoon. Mr. Rivera, I need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Richard Hale. For an hour, I walked her through everything. The stolen work, the redirected bonus, the side deals with clients. She listened carefully, taking notes. Have you noticed anything else unusual? She asked. Any threats, any attempts at intimidation? I thought about the note. Actually, yes. By the time I hung up, Richard was officially under investigation for fraud, theft, and now harassment. The story spread beyond our office. Industry contacts reached out, having heard rumors. A reporter from the local business journal called, asking for comment. I declined. This wasn't about publicity. It was about justice. But then Marcus called me into his office again. Jordan, we have a situation. My heart sank. Now what? He turned his computer screen toward me. It showed Richard's LinkedIn profile, where he'd posted a long rant claiming he was fired due to corporate politics and a vindictive subordinate spreading lies. He's naming you specifically, Marcus said grimly. He's claiming you fabricated evidence to steal his position. I felt my face flush with anger. Even now, even after being caught, he was trying to twist the narrative. Can we respond? I asked. Our lawyers are drafting a cease and desist, Marcus replied. But Jordan, I want you to know something. We have your back. Completely. That afternoon, the company issued a statement on LinkedIn, signed by Marcus himself. It didn't name Richard directly, but it made clear that an employee had been terminated for financial misconduct and fraud, with evidence provided to law enforcement. Richard's post disappeared within hours. Sarah and I postponed the wedding. Not indefinitely, but we both agreed that planning a celebration while dealing with this chaos felt wrong. Besides, she said one evening, curling up beside me on the couch, now we can actually afford the venue we wanted. The bonus, backdated with interest, had been deposited. $23,000 appeared in my account like a small miracle. And with my new salary, we were suddenly in a different financial bracket entirely. But money felt complicated now. I kept thinking about what it represented. Hours of my life. Work I'd poured my heart into. Recognition that had been stolen and was only returned because of a chance comment at a dinner party. What if Marcus hadn't asked? I said aloud. Sarah looked up from her laptop. What? At the dinner. What if he'd never mentioned the bonus? Richard would still be stealing from me. Still taking credit. Still getting promoted while I stayed stuck. She closed her laptop and took my hand. But he did ask. And now everyone knows the truth. I wanted to feel satisfied. Vindicated. But mostly I just felt tired. Melissa Park contacted me again, I said. She wants to meet tomorrow. Melissa and I met at a coffee shop near the office. She was in her mid-30s, now working at a competitor firm, and she looked nervous. Thank you for meeting me, she said, stirring her latte without drinking it. I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear this. Tell me, I said simply. She took a breath. 3 years ago, I worked under Richard in the Western Regional Division. I brought in a massive client, Stratton Financial, worth $4 million over 3 years. I leaned forward. He took credit. She nodded. Completely. Presented my entire strategy to the board as his own idea. I confronted him privately, and he told me that's how the corporate world works. That I needed to pay my dues. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. What happened? I was promised a promotion, she continued. Director level. Richard told the board I wasn't ready, that I needed more experience. He recommended himself for the position instead. Her voice cracked slightly. He got my promotion, Jordan. And a $30,000 raise that should have been mine. Why didn't you report him? She laughed bitterly. I tried. But Richard was careful. Everything was verbal. No paper trail. And he had been at the company longer, had more relationships. HR basically told me to be patient and wait my turn. After Melissa left, I sat in my car, staring at nothing. Richard had done this before. Systematically. Strategically. And he'd gotten away with it until his greed had made him sloppy enough to steal money instead of just credit. I called Linda immediately. We need to reopen Melissa Park's case. Linda was quiet for a moment. Jordan, it's been 3 years. I'm not sure what we can. He stole her work the same way he stole mine, I interrupted. If there's a pattern, if we can prove he's done this multiple times, it strengthens the case against him. And Melissa deserves justice too. Send me her contact information, Linda finally said. I'll see what I can do. That evening, I got an email from Marcus. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Something you should see. I barely slept that night. The next morning, Marcus's office was crowded. Linda was there, along with David the corporate attorney, Detective Chen, and 2 people I didn't recognize. "Jordan, meet the FBI," Marcus said. My stomach dropped. "FBI?" The woman stepped forward, showing her badge. "Agent Susan Reeves, White Collar Crime Division." "Mr. Rivera, we've been investigating Richard Hale for the past 6 months as part of a larger fraud case." I sank into a chair, my head spinning. 6 months. The FBI had been watching Richard for 6 months. "How much did you know?" I asked Marcus. He shook his head. "Nothing until yesterday. The FBI contacted us after the police report was filed." Agent Reeves pulled out a folder. "Mr. Hale has been running a sophisticated scheme across multiple companies. He moves to a new position, identifies talented employees, steals their work and diverts their compensation, then moves on before anyone notices the pattern." "How many victims?" My voice sounded distant. "That we know of?" 17, across 5 companies over 9 years. 17 people. 9 years. And he had almost gotten away with it again. "Your case is unique," Agent Reeves continued. "Because the CEO witnessed the theft directly. In every other case, victims either didn't realize what was happening or couldn't prove it. Your situation broke the pattern open." Detective Chen leaned forward. "We need your help, Jordan. We're building a case for a grand jury. With your testimony and the evidence from your company, we can potentially recover stolen funds for all 17 victims." I looked at Marcus. "What do you need from me?" "The truth," he said simply. "Just keep telling the truth." The next 2 weeks were a blur of meetings, depositions, and interviews. The FBI's investigation was massive. They'd uncovered shell companies, offshore accounts, and a network of fraudulent transactions spanning nearly a decade. Richard had stolen an estimated $1.2 million from his victims over 9 years. And those were just the cases they could prove. I met some of the other victims through the investigation. People like me, talented and hardworking, who'd had their careers derailed by Richard's systematic theft. There was Marcus Obi, who'd left the workforce entirely after Richard destroyed his reputation at a previous company. There was Jennifer Wu, who'd struggled with depression after being gaslit for 2 years about her own contributions. Each story was heartbreaking. Each person had been exploited and discarded. "Why did he do it?" Jennifer asked during a victim support meeting the FBI had organized. "He was making good money legitimately." "Why steal?" Agent Reeves, who attended the meeting, answered carefully. "Some people are motivated by greed. Others by ego. Richard Hale appears to be both. He wanted money and recognition, and he didn't care who he hurt to get it." My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "How are you holding up?" "Tired," I typed back. "But okay." "Proud of you," she responded. "Come home soon." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for October 15th. Richard showed up with an expensive defense attorney, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He didn't look at me once. The prosecutor laid out the case systematically. The redirected bonus. The falsified reports. The side deals with clients. Richard's attorney tried to claim misunderstandings and administrative errors, but the evidence was overwhelming. After 3 hours, the judge ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Richard was released on bail but ordered to surrender his passport and remain in state. As we left the courthouse, Richard's attorney stopped me in the hallway. "My client would like to discuss a settlement." I stared at him. "A settlement?" "He's willing to admit to certain irregularities regarding your bonus, in exchange for your testimony being limited in scope at trial." I felt my jaw tighten. "He wants me to lie. He wants to resolve this efficiently," the attorney said smoothly. "Think about it. A lengthy trial will be stressful for everyone involved. This way, you get your money back and can move on with your life." I looked past him to where Richard stood by the elevator, his expression carefully blank. Tell your client, I said clearly, that I'm not interested in settling. I'm interested in justice. The trial date was set for January 12th. 3 months away. Long enough for the FBI to finish their investigation, but soon enough that evidence remained fresh. I tried to focus on work, on my new role as senior director. I had a team to build, clients to manage, strategies to develop. But Richard's shadow loomed over everything. Then Marcus called me into his office again. "We have a problem," he said, his expression grave. My stomach clenched. "What now?" "Richard's attorney has filed a countersuit. He's claiming wrongful termination, defamation, and emotional distress. He's suing the company for $5 million. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Can he do that?" "He can file anything he wants," David, our attorney, said from his seat by the window. "Whether he'll win is another question entirely. This is a pressure tactic, designed to make us settle the criminal case to avoid the civil lawsuit." "We're not settling," Marcus said firmly. "But Jordan, I need you to know this might get uglier before it gets better." That night, Sarah found me sitting in our dark living room, staring at nothing. "Talk to me," she said softly, sitting beside me. "I'm tired," I admitted. "I just want this to be over." But it wasn't over. Richard's countersuit meant more depositions, more meetings, more questions. His attorney dug into every aspect of my work history, looking for anything to undermine my credibility. They questioned my performance reviews, my relationships with colleagues, even my attendance record. It was exhausting and invasive. Then they made a mistake. Richard's attorney subpoenaed my personal emails, looking for evidence I had conspired against Richard. What they found instead was 2 years of messages to Sarah, venting about Richard taking credit for my work. Detailed accounts of specific instances, dates, and projects. Contemporaneous documentation of everything he'd stolen. "This is actually good for us," David explained when I panicked about my private messages being exposed. "It proves you were aware of the theft as it happened and that your testimony is consistent with your real-time reactions. This isn't something you invented after being caught." The irony wasn't lost on me. Richard's attempt to discredit me had instead provided some of our strongest evidence. But the emotional toll was real. I was anxious all the time, struggling to sleep, snapping at Sarah over small things. "Maybe we should talk to someone," she suggested gently one evening. "A therapist. This is trauma, Jordan. What he did to you, what you're going through now, it's okay to need help processing it." I started therapy in November. Dr. Martinez was patient and practical, helping me separate the case from my self-worth. "What Richard did wasn't about you being inadequate," she explained during our 3rd session. "It was about him being threatened by your competence. Predators target the talented because that's where the value is to steal." It helped. Slowly, I started sleeping better. The constant anxiety didn't disappear, but it became manageable. And at work, I was thriving. My team was strong. My clients were happy. I was doing the job Richard had pretended to do, and I was doing it well. Then, a week before Christmas, Agent Reeves called. "We've made an arrest." I sat up straight. "Who?" "Richard's wife, Diane. She was complicit in the fraud scheme. She knew about the stolen bonuses and helped launder the money through various accounts." I thought about the account that had received my bonus. The one in Diane's name. She hadn't been an innocent bystander. She'd been a partner in the theft. "What happens now?" "She's cooperating," Agent Reeves said. "Providing testimony about Richard's activities in exchange for a reduced sentence." "Jordan, this is big. Her testimony fills in gaps we couldn't prove before. So the trial is basically over before it starts." With Diane's cooperation, Richard's attorney will likely push hard for a plea deal. Christmas felt surreal. Sarah and I spent it with her family, trying to pretend everything was normal. But my phone kept buzzing with updates. Richard's attorney had indeed requested a plea negotiation. The prosecutor was considering terms. On January 4th, 8 days before the trial was scheduled to start, I got the call. Richard had accepted a plea deal. He pled guilty to wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. He would serve 4 years in federal prison and pay restitution to all victims. 4 years. It seemed like both a lifetime and not nearly enough. What about the countersuit? I asked David. Dismissed with prejudice. Part of the plea agreement included dropping all civil claims against the company and agreeing never to work in corporate America again. I sat down heavily. It was over. Actually, finally over. That evening, Marcus held a small gathering at his house. Just the core team, the people who'd supported me through everything. To Jordan, he said, raising his glass. For having the courage to speak up and the strength to see it through. Everyone drank. I felt Sarah's hand find mine under the table. Speech, someone called out. I stood, my legs shaky. I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to do my job and be recognized for it. But what I learned is that silence protects predators. Speaking up, even when it's terrifying, even when you don't know if anyone will believe you, that's how we stop people like Richard. The restitution check started arriving in February. $23,000 for me, plus compensation for the emotional distress and career impact. Melissa Park received $75,000. Marcus Obi, whose career had been destroyed, received $350,000. The FBI had liquidated Richard's assets, sold his house, emptied his accounts. Everything he'd stolen, plus penalties, was being returned to his victims. I used some of my money to finally book our wedding venue. Sarah and I set a date for June, a small ceremony with close friends and family. No work people, Sarah said firmly. Except Jen, I countered. Jen stood by me. Sarah smiled. Except Jen. At work, my team had grown to 8 people. We'd landed 4 major clients in 3 months. Marcus was talking about expanding the department, maybe opening a West Coast office with me overseeing both locations. You've earned it, he said simply. But the best moment came in March, when I got an email from Jennifer Wu, one of Richard's other victims. Jordan, I wanted you to know I got a job offer today. Director of Strategy at a Fortune 500 company. I never thought I'd have the confidence to apply for leadership positions again after what Richard did. But watching you fight back inspired me to try. Thank you. April brought unexpected news. Agent Reeves called to tell me the FBI was using Richard's case as a training example for detecting corporate fraud patterns. Your situation, the CEO's direct observation, the immediate documentation, the comprehensive audit, it's basically a textbook example of how these cases should be handled, she explained. We're hoping it will help other companies recognize and stop this behavior earlier. I thought about that a lot. How one random question at a dinner party had unraveled 9 years of systematic theft. How easily it could have continued if Marcus had never mentioned the bonus. How many victims there might have been if Richard had been more careful. The randomness of justice bothered me. But then I thought about what I'd learned. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Speak up when something feels wrong. Don't let shame or fear keep you silent. These weren't random lessons. They were hard-won wisdom I could share. So when a local university asked me to speak to their business students about workplace ethics, I said yes. Standing in front of 120 young people, I told them my story. I watched their expressions shift from shock to anger to determination. During the Q&A, a young woman raised her hand. How did you find the courage to speak up when you did? I thought about her question carefully. Honestly? I didn't feel courageous. I felt terrified and angry and humiliated. But I realized something important: courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding that something else matters more than your fear. The students nodded, taking notes. What mattered more was the truth, I continued. And protecting the next person Richard might have targeted. If I'd stayed silent, he would have done this to someone else. After my speech, several students came up to thank me. One young man told me his previous employer had taken credit for his work, and he'd quit without fighting back. I thought I was being professional by not making waves, he said. Now I realize I was just letting him get away with it. I gave him my card. If you ever face something like that again, document it and report it. You deserve to have your work recognized. Sarah was waiting in the parking lot. How'd it go? Good, I said, climbing into the car. Really good, actually. She smiled. Ready for our final venue walkthrough? The wedding was 2 months away. Everything was coming together. And for the first time since that dinner party 8 months ago, I felt genuinely at peace. June 14th arrived bright and clear. Sarah looked stunning in her dress, and I managed not to cry during our vows. Mostly. The reception was small but perfect. Jen caught the bouquet and immediately looked terrified. Marcus gave a toast about integrity and courage that made me embarrassed but grateful. And as Sarah and I danced our first dance as a married couple, I realized something. Richard hadn't just stolen my money and credit. He'd stolen my confidence, my trust in the system, my belief that hard work would be recognized. But I'd taken it all back. Not just the money, though that helped. I'd reclaimed my sense of self-worth. I'd learned to advocate for myself. I'd found the strength to fight back against injustice. Richard was in prison. I was married to the love of my life, thriving in my career, and helping others avoid what I'd gone through. In trying to destroy me, he'd accidentally made me stronger. As Sarah whispered "I love you" against my shoulder, I smiled. This was victory. Not revenge, not vindication, just the simple, powerful truth of a life rebuilt on my own terms. And it was worth far more than any stolen bonus could ever be.